Hello everyone and welcome to the first game we'll be showing from the Freestyle Chess G.O.A.T Challenge 2024, which is, well, just a fancy way of saying they've met up in a village in northern Germany to play some official random chess. But joking aside, it is actually very nice. This is the place. Sorry, now that those are the rules. This is the place that I'm talking about, the Waisenhaus, a private nature luxury resort situated in northern Germany. So you can see the venue, really beautiful scenery. And these are the rules, as this is official random chess, so all the pieces are scrambled. And the format and setup, as this is the first game we are showing, so it's going to be a round robin. First, they're going to be 2 days of rapid, so 25 minutes for the game plus 10 seconds per move, according to the A5 of the FIDE laws of chess. And then for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, 2 games standard 90 minutes plus 40 moves plus 30 minutes for the rest of the game, additional 30 seconds per move. So 2 days of rapid chess and then 6 more days of classical chess. That's how it's going. And the 2 days of rapid chess are basically qualifications to see how you will start and who you will play against in the classical time format. So it's a very strong event, features some of the strongest players in the world. Let's check it out. First game we are showing Gukesh versus Magnus Carlsen from round 2. Let's check it out. Gukesh with the white pieces opens with pawn to f4. Now, before we check out the game, I would just like to mention, for those of you who are watching for the first time, you might have a question: if the pieces are all scrambled up, can you castle in this variant of chess? Yes, you can castle, and the way you castle is, well, look at the king. The king is on c1. You can still castle queen side, and you can also still castle king side. For example, to castle king side, you would have to clear everything in between the king and the rook, so the 2 knights and the 2 bishops here, and you will just castle king side, and the king will go to a square g1, where the king will usually go in normal chess when king castles king side, and the rook will go to f1, where the rook usually goes when you castle king side in regular chess. So that's how you do it, and that's basically it. It's applies same for queen side. Once you castle queen side, the king will you have to just move the queen and the bishop from d1, because once you castle, the king will remain on c1, because that's where the king would go if you castled queenside in regular chess, and the rook will come to d1, where it would come if you castled in regular chess. So that's pretty much it. Other than that, everything else is exactly the same. And of course, there are no openings here unless you're able to know all 960 positions and come up with openings for all of them and remember them. Then yes, there are openings even in chess 960. But I don't think people can do that. Maybe these guys can, but I don't know. So let's check it out. And here we have pawn to f4 by Gukesh, pawn to c6 by Magnus, opening up the queen, putting pressure on that f4 pawn right away, g3 defending, and now pawn to f5. He's opening up the light square bishop, maybe preparing bishop at the d5 to go after the rook on h1, knight to f3, and now bishop to b6, countering the bishop on g1, pawn to c3, preparing to expand in the center with d4 and d4, and Magnus trades bishops. Bishop captures on g1, rook captures, and knight to d6. Maybe thinking about planting a knight on e4. So d3 and pawn to b5. We have pawn to e4, and now f captures on e4, d captures on e4, and the queen to b6, putting pressure on that rook on g1. So if the knight moves, you might lose the rook. Knight 1 to d2, and now pawn to g5. Trying to mess up Gukesh's pawn structure here, or you force him to move the knight and then you pick up the rook. So here f captures on g5, Gukesh doesn't mind. Knight to e6, developing while putting more pressure on the g5 pawn, and now rook back to e1. We have bishop to f7, and now bishop to b3. And here it's a really good example of castling in official random chess. You can still castle queenside. If you castle queenside, this is what would happen, and if you castle kingside, then this is what would happen. You just put them in a position they would normally go into in regular chess, and this is exactly what Magnus played. And it's one of the things that you really have to figure out when you're playing official random chess, because, okay, if you look at the position now, it's a pretty standard position. It doesn't look any different from any position that you would have in regular chess. But it's easy to forget that your opponent, sometimes you're deep in thought, you're thinking about attacking that king on c8. It's easy to forget that your opponent can just castle kingside. You shift shift all of your attention to the queen side, you move everything to the queen side, and then he just, I'm out of here. And I mean, it does happen. So here we have queen to c2, developing the queen, also with ideas of castling, and now just pawn to a5. Magnus wants to play pawn to a4 here, pawn to e5 attacking the knight, and now, while this does open up this diagonal for the queen, it also opens up this diagonal for Magnus's bishop. So he first plays bishop to g6, attacks the queen, and now Gukesh frees up the b3 square for the queen with tempo. Bishop captures, pawn captures, and queen b3, attacking the pawn on e6. But Magnus just plays knight to b7. He gives up the pawn, as later on he's going to play rook to f7. He can bring the other rook to the game. He can attack the queen with knight to c5. He doesn't really need this doubled pawn. And okay, queen captures on e6. Gukesh captures it. Rook to f7, and now knight to d4. Putting pressure on the c6 pawn, and here comes Magnus's real idea, and that is knight to c5, attacking the queen on e6 and also threatening knight to d3 check to win the exchange on e1. But Gukesh plays queen captures on c6, and now knight to d3 check, king to d1, and now knight captures on e1. And knight captures on e1, if you play this right away, then the queen is undefended, so you have to capture the queen first. But even if you capture the queen first, for example, knight captures on c6 and knight captures on e1, then king captures, and you're down 3 pawns. Yes, you're up the exchange, but you're down 3 pawns. It's not really something. So Magnus instead goes for knight captures on b2. It is the better move. Even better would be queen to b8 perhaps, but knight captures on b2 also works. We have king to e2, and now queen captures on c6. Magnus trades queens, but queen to d8 would be the better way to go. Magnus thought, okay, I have the exchange. Let's just trade, but keeping the tension was the way to go here. He played queen captures on c6, knight captures, and now rook to c8, but here comes pawn to e6. It's the only move Gukesh has, but it is enough for him to keep the tension. If you go back with the knight, let's say knight d4, then bishop to h5 check, then rook captures on c3, and everything falls apart for him. However, after pawn to e6, it's not so easy to play this. Bishop to h5 check, we have king to e3, now there's no rook captures on c3, and rook to g7, putting pressure on the g5 pawn. We have knight to e5, and rook captures on g5. Rook captures on c3 would be a bit too dangerous, allowing king d4, attacking the rook. The king gets activated, and if you move the rook, then even knight to e4 with some g4, h4 ideas, it's a much better position for Gukesh. So instead, after knight e5, rook captures on g5 by Magnus, attacking the knight here, and now king to d4. Very bold play by Gukesh. Rook to d8 with check, knight to d7, and now bishop to g4. Bishop to g4 with some ideas of maybe going after the pawn right away. You can capture, and then after rook captures, you take out the knight, or maybe you even prepare it with rook to g6. So all in all, a very useful move. We have rook to e5 now. Makes sense as you are threatening rook captures on g5 with check. So rook to g6, and now rook to d5. Point being that if you now capture the pawn, then there's this wonderful knight to f6 with check, and you blunder the rook on d8. So instead, after rook to d5, king to g7, now comes knight to e5, attacking the rook. Rook captures on d5 check, king captures, and now bishop captures on e6 with check. And this is where Magnus miscalculates a little bit. The correct way to go was rook captures on e6, and you don't have to worry about the knight captures on g4 because there's rook to d6 check followed by rook captures on d2. But after king captures, bishop captures on e6 with check was played. King to d4, and now rook to h6, going after the pawn on h2, but now rook to b1, attacks the knight. We have knight to a4, and now rook captures on b5. So you can see how white gets a lot more activity with this line. We have bishop captures on a2, now comes pawn to c4, and now Gukesh with the passed c pawn. It's time to really come up with a a plan to defend. Rook captures on h2. We have knight d to f3 with an attack on the rook. Rook to h6, and now rook captures on a5, attacking the knight. Rook to d6 with check, king to e3, and now knight to c3. You have to also defend the bishop on a2, but now rook a3, still putting pressure on the bishop and the knight, and now knight to d1 with check. Only way to defend. king to e2, and now bishop to b1. It is the only way to defend, but not to defend successfully. It's only the only way to defend if maybe Gukesh doesn't play the strongest moves, but he does. Pawn to c5, challenges the rook, rook to d5, but now just pawn to c6. And how do you play this? Of course, you cannot put the rook behind the passed pawn. That would hang the knight, and other moves that don't really work. Bishop to f5 was played. Okay, you control the queening square. c7, and now knight to b2. We have rook to a2, attacking the knight on b2, knight back to d1, and rook to c2 now, preparing to advance the pawn into a queen. So bishop to c8, you have to play this, and now knight to d3. The knight is now not defended, but okay, even if you capture on d1, also rook captures on d3 will happen with check. So king f6, Magnus doesn't have to react to this, and now rook to c1, threatening rook captures on d1. Pawn to e5, Magnus finds a very nice resource, and now the problem is, if you capture on d1, then pawn to e4, and you're gonna pick up one of those knights with check. You're gonna approach the pawn on c7, and it will fizzle out into a draw. So instead, we have knight f captures on e5. Makes sense. Because if you capture, then it's not really an issue. Knight to b2, and now rook to f1 with check. Here again, if you capture on b2, then the knight on e5 it becomes defenseless. But here comes rook to f1 check, king to e7, and now knight to c6 with check, removing the threat of rook captures on e5, and now you're just going to win a piece on b2. So king to d6, and only move left to finish it up is rook to f6 with check. And of course, blocking with the bishop is pointless, because then you just bring a queen into the game, and the bishop is pinned, so you have to give up the piece. King captures on c7 was played, and now knight captures on b2. And okay, the situation on the clock is 30 seconds for Gukesh and 40 seconds for Magnus, so maybe he can still hold this, being down a piece. But it's going to be very, very difficult. Bishop to b7 puts pressure on the knight. Knight to b4 attacks the rook, and now rook to h5. And, you know, when your opponent has a knight, you want your rook as far away as possible from your king. But when he has two knights, you really want your rook, you know, at the edge of the board. We have knight to c4. Placing the knight on c4 next to the knight on b4 creates a wall against Magnus's king. And now you will start checking. Rook to c7 check will force the king further back, and then you will of course try to checkmate him. We have rook to h3 going after the pawn. Now rook f7 check, king to b8, and knight to d6 going after the bishop on b7, bishop to h1, and now while you probably could play king to f2 to defend the g3 pawn, Gukesh goes for the attack. Knight to a6 with check. We have king to a8, and now knight to b5, and here there's no defense. Rook to a7 will be checkmate, as the knight covers the b8 square. There's nothing more to be done here, and he was in this position on move 58 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So you could prolong it a little bit with something like bishop to b7, but after rook to f8 with check, there's not much to be done. You're going to have to trade bishop for knight. After captures, let's say king b7, knight to d6 with check, king captures on a6, you will go king f3, and yeah, you're up a full knight, of course, completely winning. So Magnus decided to give it a rest here. He will try his luck in some other games. So yeah, that's the first game that we've covered. If you have any suggestions, also do use #suggestion. World champion Ding Liren had a pretty rough start in the first 3 games. He lost all 3. Let me just check real quickly how he's doing in the 4th game. Let me just check it out. Yeah, okay, it's still being played, so no update there, but
we will
yeah,
jump into the standard position between Vincent, but take us through Magnus versus Lab.
We need to go to
Magnus
against Aronian, because
but yeah,
Magnus
maybe
just
after the rapid event is over, maybe he will
really, it looks like
come back stronger in classical. So we'll see what happens.
Which, let's be honest, looked like this already after the first few moves.
That's the official broadcast. Yeah, just turned on. Yeah, that's because they have autoplay on. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Pat Koppinger, David Benz, Peter Albner, Robert Taratun, and David Gasparian for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.